that's so exciting, and it's so amazingly attractive.
Yeah, you're not laughing now, are you?
And of course he's not laughing now. Oh, what's happened? I've made no special arrangements for our guest tonight. Right, I'm just going to say a couple of words before we kick in. We put a poll in onto YouTube. I might have to refresh it. But let me explain this at first. Usually if I have a guest on or I specify a subject, I've usually got a little bit of knowledge about it. I've usually got an angle or an edge or some kind of education. But the free will thing, I'm ignorant, I think, is the word. And with the collection of miscreants, maladjusts, ne'er-do-wells, gutter snipes, drug addicts, prostitutes, and the rest of society's slag, I think they call it, the runoff from a failed a failed piece of there's a Japanese art where they repair broken bowls with gold. They use it as an analogy for repairing your soul. Yeah. So if ever you see me come on here with sort of like zigzags of gold across my face and like half my chin hanging off, I'm better than I was before. So without further ado, I don't know a lot about this. So unfortunately, my old mucker, Teddy D, as he's known in the hood, is also going to have to explain. You'll have to apologise with my cravat. It was so late. I was so late doing it that the tail stops there. I mean, I'd usually have my button open to that one in this 36 degrees Celsius, but then I'd have like this weird little, that might happen by accident anyway. Without further ado, nice to see the OGs in early. Ladies and gentlemen, Teddy Dutton. Hello, Edward.
Hello, Christopher. How are you doing? It's good to see you again.
I feel like the idiot, and I know you probably thought that's not an unfamiliar feeling for me. In this instance, I'm going to learn something, I think, tonight. I think I'm going to learn from you.
No, not the. You've got the cravat sorted out. It looks perfect. It's perfectly well done. It's as though you wear them all the time in 36-degree heat.
I actually do, and you'd know, being a cravat wearer, you'd know why. Because if I don't, 1 hour in a white shirt, and that shirt needs washing because the back of the neck is blacker than.
Well, it was very hot in Croatia when I was there a couple of years ago, and that's where they're from, Croatia. So
really, that's the.
That's why they're called Croat. And so,
that was a ridiculous set of lily pads there. No, that's why they're called cravats. Croatia, cravats.
That's my understanding. And the Croatian soldiers wore them. So maybe that was it. Maybe it was a response to the heat.
There you go. I thought they were invented in New and Lingwood. So people, this is quite interesting. Before I contacted Edward, I said, I didn't say anything. Well, I did, but it wasn't relevant to what I'm saying now. There's a very famous scientist, I don't know what you'd call him, called Robert Sapolsky. Stanford, I think, is his man, at Stanford University. Well-known bloke. You must have heard of.
Yes. I spotted up on him in preparation for this interview.
So did I. The difference being, you probably thought, oh, yeah. Whereas I was like, oh, fucking hell, man. Maximal something. But he has recently released a book about, he's a free, not a free speech, he's a no free will absolutist. He describes himself as that. And his book, he's had a little cheeky play on words. His new book that he's promoting, and I'll tell you, just put Robert into YouTube and you'll find 1,000 podcasts of Robert Sapolsky telling the same 5 stories on, promoting his book, which is absolutely fine. But it got me thinking, because I've had a friend who has he doesn't stop talking about we don't have free will. And the truth is, and this is a truth, I haven't wanted to entertain that because I don't like the implications of it. I think my narcissism doesn't like the implications of there being no free will. So, Edward, could we start by you explaining what the free will is that you?
Well, that's the thing. You've got if you like a belief in hard. So he wrote a book, as you know, called Determined, and we're talking about the difference between hard free will and soft free will. And then even if we can't accept the existence of free will, I'm interested in other questions such as is it adaptive to believe, even if it's wrong, that we have free will and things like that. But in terms of soft free will would just be the basic thing that if you're not externally coerced, so unless someone is putting a gun at your head and saying do this or kill you, then you have free will to do whatever you want, even if there are very bad consequences to it. If there are consequences short of death, then you have free will. Although you can talk about degrees of that, and that's why they've brought in these laws in the UK, coercive control and things like that, and it raises ideas about, well, how much do you have free will? There's a degree to which we can be manipulated, we can be hypnotized, we can be persuaded. But in general, in law, it's understood, no, if you can be persuaded, so what? You have free will, and the fact that some people are more open.
You've also got in law things like the insanity defense.
Well, yeah, so then it's believed that that you don't, well, not so much that you don't have free will, but that you don't know the difference between right and wrong. And you're insane, and therefore you can get you're not.
I'm all for going in this direction, not a problem at all. Is it that you don't know the difference between right or wrong, or is it that you just?
My understanding is that you can. There have been cases where a person has pled that they are mentally ill. And the defense has argued that, fine, they may well be schizophrenic or whatever, but they still know the difference between right and wrong. So you have to be like very, very insane, as you put it, to not know the difference between right and wrong. So you can't just say, oh, I was depressed, so I killed him. Yeah, but you knew it was wrong to kill him, even though you were depressed. So you're guilty. It's a crime rather than a function of mental illness. But that's the soft free will idea, that free will is in everyday usage. That's what we mean. This person was not free to act because otherwise they'd have been shot. So they couldn't make a free decision. The hard free will notion is, are we in some ontological sense making free decisions? Now, in that way, I would agree with Sapolsky that no, and we don't have free will. Basically is this: human beings act according to their brain. The brain is the muscle which reflects intelligence, personality. It's the muscle via which we act. That muscle is very, very strongly genetic, and how we act is a combination of in those genes and previous environmental reactions with those genes, which have led to synapses and whatever, and memories and whatever else, and then the environmental situation which we happen to find ourselves in. Now, it seems to me that there is no space in that to say that a decision is ontologically free. The decision that you make could be, in theory, predicted by virtue of your previous decisions and your previous decisions and your previous decisions and your previous experiences and what they have done to your brain, combined with the genetics that you have inherited in terms of your brain. So there's a philosopher of religion called John Hick who accepts this, but he argues that in the moment of decision, somehow you are a vortex that is above your genetics and the environmental influences on how your brain has developed, and therefore you can make a free decision. But I don't see how that follows. So that seems to be the fundamental problem. Where is the space if your brain is a combination of genetics and environmental influences on the brain as a genetic organ, and how that has molded the brain in certain ways, and that is why you will make a particular decision in particular circumstances. It may seem free, and it may seem like you have you have one of two choices, and you can make whichever one you like. But it's not. By virtue of your genetics and by virtue of what the interaction between your genetics and the environment and how that has built your brain up, it can be predicted which reaction you will take in any circumstance, and so therefore it's not free. We can. Sorry, you've cut out.
Oh, you've gone. Oh, you're back. I've got slight internet issues, it would appear.
Yes, I noticed. Yes.
Apologies. It goes further back than that, doesn't it? I've seen these people talking about your grandmother way back in time, still affecting. You're looking at me with squint.
You keep cutting out. That's known as epigenetics. So this idea that the gene, the allele, can be altered in a certain way by and that alteration can be inherited, almost like an allele that's been subject to radiation. So that's one thing.
Hang on, sorry, I'm trying to turn it off. I'm going Wi-Fi. Apologies, Edward. I really should have. Oh, I don't know how to do it even. If this carries on, we'll drop this out because I'm not going to sit here. Hang on, disable. That'd be good. Now we're just on Wi-Fi. Really sorry, that's embarrassing. And yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, for fuck's sake! Hello, Edward.
Hello.
Right, if this carries on, we'll drop it out and we'll do it another night. We'll give it one last push though. I've turned the Ethernet off. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, I can hear that in your voice. So what's that called? You just said where it goes back.
It's called epigenetics. It's a contested concept. But you can take it even further than that. We can just go to the fundamental level of particle physics and say, like, we are all made up of particles. And these particles are made up of fundamental particles. And these are electrons, up and down, quartons, photons, and gluons. And they interact together in certain predictable ways. They are deterministic. You can determine, you can put them together, and you can absolutely determine how they will act together. Now you do have this idea. You do have this idea of the quantum jump. Some people don't believe in quantum physics, but the quantum jump, which is that something will change randomly if it is measured.
Yeah. So
the quantum jump. So this means there are some values that you can't know at the same time as knowing other values, because but even these quantum jumps, these wave functions, change in a deterministic way. So what that means is that all of these particles are fundamentally deterministic, and the moment you set something off, it can only act in a certain determined way, and we are made up of those particles, and therefore we can only act in a certain we are emergent properties of those particles, and so we can only act in a certain way, and so the result of that is that there is no room for free will,
and therefore there's no room for self, or the concept of self is very much diluted. You know, I think I'm quite good, I quite like myself, I do this, I do that, I've made these choices and decisions, but they were given to me. I've inherited them from reality. They're not actually much to do with what I might have once called me.
No, I mean the thing is that you call you, or aspects of it can change across time. So, for example, intelligence is 0.6 the same between the ages of 8 and 18. It changes in reference to other people across time. So you end up with a number of situations. One is that you can throw out the science. You can say there's a non-physical realm in which you have a soul, and the soul has free will. Or you can say that free will is not compatible with the science, which I think is fair enough. That's called hard incompatibilism. Or you can say, I don't know, that something that we do consciously is free, but something that we do unconsciously is not free. But even if that's the case, then surely the thing that we do consciously is equally unfree for the reasons I set out. And even if you say there is a soul, then and that has free will, then, well, someone has created, like, that soul has, if our souls are each the essence of us and they're each different, then something has caused our souls to be different and therefore to react differently in different circumstances, and presumably that's God. And therefore we're not free because the essence of us is being created by God. Yeah. And so then you get back to a sort of Calvinistic theology in which you say, really, that there is no free will at all, and that God just creates some people to go to heaven and some people to go to hell. So even theologically, I can't see how there's any room for free will in the hard sense of free will.
So are you getting that, people? Edward is saying that there's no free will. What you think constitutes you as a person, a self, an individual, which is still there. I mean, from the outside, it still looks the same. But I suppose the question is, can you take any, what's the word I'm looking for? Can you take any credit for things you do? I mean, imagine I write an amazing novel. I mean, luckily I do anyway. But when they say he's a great writer, what does that really mean to me?
Well, part of it is going to, I mean, even if we put aside the issue of free will, then even if we accept we have free will, then a big part of what makes you a great writer is going to be traits like intelligence and personality. And these are maybe 80%, 70% genetic. So even if we accept that we have free will, a big part of what makes Chris Dangerfield a great artist or whatever is just genetics, which has nothing to do with anything he's done. And that's
the additional 20, the other 20% is environmental, and I didn't choose to grow up in that little house in Dartford.
That could be partly at least an outworking of the relationship between the genetics and the environment. So it comes down to, I think, just it's almost like I think that the more interesting question is, what are the consequences? It's like, do you believe in love? Does love exist? Well, not really. I mean, love is reducible to genetics and to experiences you've had, which cause you to find a particular person and to fall in love with them. And if that's mutual, there's often a predictability to that. People select for genetic similarity, for example, or people select for certain physical characteristics which they find physically attractive, or people select for homophily in terms of things like certain life events they've gone through or certain traumas they've gone through, and so this sort of thing. And so in that way, you could predict at a given point whether this person and this person would fall in love. There's a predictability even to something like that. But yet we still believe. We don't say, oh yeah, I'm having some chemical reaction in my brain with regard to this person. We feel this thing very strongly called love, and it feels very real, and we act accordingly. And I think the same is true of free will. It might not exist in some platonic sense, but it feels very real, and it feels differentially real to different people.
Well, this was the question I was going to ask you, and it is about the consequences. I can't remember who said it during my research, but a few people actually. There's a suggestion that you should buy the illusion. Just buy the illusion of free will, because it actually adds to your experience of existence. And that's kind of why I didn't want to, my friend who's been going on about it for 20 or 30 years, I didn't want to, I sort of knew that he was right, and I didn't want to live according to a deterministic criteria, because it just felt like it took everything from me that made me proud of being me.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's William James's idea that even if you don't believe in God, you should force yourself via effortful control to believe in God, because then you will believe that your life has eternal meaning, and then you will feel happier, and then you will, and you will act in a more pro-social way. And there is some evidence that we do force ourselves to change our minds. I mean, that's why everybody in Finland has moved from being nationalistic and racist to being pro-multiculturalist over the last 10 years, because it's the social pressure. People can force themselves to change, kind of with enough pressure to change their minds. And so with regard to free will, there was a paper I found called Subjective Correlates and Consequences of Belief in Free Will by Cressoni et al. In Philosophical Psychology. And it found that people that believe in free will have greater life satisfaction, they have less stress, they have higher self-esteem, and they feel that their life has a sense of eternal meaning. And then people that don't believe in free will, they feel that their life has less meaning, and this seems to essentially make them depressed. And in fact, it was found that when people have a sense of life being meaningless, that's one of the things that makes them depressed, and depressed people have a sense of life being meaningless. On average, right-wing people are low in depression and they are high in religious belief, and left-wing people are high in depression and they are low in religious belief. And the study finds that right-wing people have much more of a belief that they have free will, that they have personal efficacy, that they are in control of their lives, and so on. And also it's found that when you don't believe in free will, you're more prone to cheat, because presumably you don't believe that there's anything eternal, any reason to do anything, and so therefore you cheat. And the reason for this is a belief in self-control, a belief that you have control of your life. And so it seems to be adaptive to believe that. People that are genetically healthy believe that, and it makes you healthy if you believe that. If you don't believe that, if you think that you have no free will, then you think life is meaningless, then you are depressed. And one of the things that seems to be associated with not believing in free will is social conformism. So people that believe they don't have free will, they believe life is meaningless, and they then very strongly socially conform to whatever the current thing is to kind of give their lives a sense of meaning. Whereas people that believe in free will, they have a sense of meaning, and therefore they have the confidence to be who they are rather than to slavishly socially conform. So it seems that the benefits to believing in free will psychologically are very high, even though we can't find any evidence that there is free will. It's like believing in God. And the other balance that you seem to get, which is interesting, is that believing in free will is associated with mental health, low stress, high self-esteem, life has meaning, but so is belief in God. Yeah. And one of the aspects of belief in God is often that you pray to God to guide you, and indeed you feel that God ultimately has a plan for you and that your life is unfolding according to his divine plan. So it's this sort of paradox where the very same people that in a sense don't believe in free will because they believe, oh, my life is all planned and God has it planned out and whatever, also do believe in free will because free will gives them a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose and a sense that they're in control of their lives, and this is all healthy. And I saw this contradiction very neatly with a good friend of mine who I lived with when I was at university, who was a fundamentalist Christian. And she was very stressed about this job she'd applied for or something. And she basically said, you know, if I get it, that's great because it means I've done really well and I can be proud of myself and I'm happy. But if I don't get it, that's also good because it's God's will and God has a plan for me.
It's quite.
So it keeps you happy at any given time to oscillate between believing in free will, unique, person, self, all those things you were talking about. Therefore, you can be proud of your actions. Therefore, you can feel good if you achieve things. But if you balls up, then, well, you don't want to say, okay, well, maybe I'm a rubbish person. Maybe I'm shit. Maybe I'm no good. So then you say, oh, well, then I don't have free will. That was actually God's plan.
Yeah. So you were quite you said you don't believe in free will. Do you buy into the illusion, or are you one of the depressed life is meaningless?
I buy into the delusion, but I think that if you go through parts of your life when you are feeling either, I'm guessing, like very, very stressed, then people tend to become more religious, and in becoming more religious, they will often invoke God and ask for God to help them, and therefore, in that sense, kind of they don't believe in free will, do they? Because they're asking God to divinely intervene according to His plan and whatever. But then equally, if you become very down and depressed, then you can start believing there's no free will and it's all doom and gloom and everything's just going to pad out in a depressing and unpleasant way, and you have no power to do anything about it, and you just might as well just give up. And so I think it depends on your mood. And some of these psychological studies I mentioned, they do things like induce a lack of belief in free will. And if you induce that, then people become depressed and down and whatever. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if it's like a balance. Like if you induce, I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe if you induce too much belief in free will, maybe that makes people stressed.
But it's not inducing a belief, though, is it? It's buying an illusion.
Well, in the psychological speak, it's priming. So you make people think, you sort of hypnotize people, if you like, to think in a certain way, to think there is no free will, or to think there is free will. And I wonder if there's a sort of balance that's right. Like if you don't believe there's any free will, if you really don't believe that, then often people that don't believe that are depressed and they're down and they feel life has.
You really don't believe that, do you? You really don't believe
I believe it. I believe it logically, but I don't feel it. Whereas perhaps if you're depressed and you're down, then you actually feel it. So there's a difference between logically concluding life has no meaning and really feeling it, such that you're like that playwright Sarah Kane, and you have to write these macabre, horrible plays about suicide, and eventually you commit suicide at age 28 by hanging yourself with Mason with Doc Martens, as she did.
Could have saved a lot of writing.
Oh well, yeah, very dark stuff. And then on the other hand, I wonder if a really extreme belief in free will, such that you don't believe in God, such that you don't believe there's anyone looking after you or guiding you or whatever, I wonder if that also creates a sense of meaninglessness. And that these people, these religious people, that are the people that are happy, they seem to have the optimum balance where they oscillate between believing they have free will, but God's ultimately there in the background.
Yeah.
And believing that they don't have free will, but it's kind of there. God's looking after them, but there is a bit of free will.
When you said the people that completely believe in free will, I just had this image of someone dressed up as a harlequin dancing around in a field with, not a worry in the world.
Well, there was a guy I interviewed on my channel, The Jolly Heretic, a while ago. Well, what was his name now? And he came up with this idea of how we became self-aware. You talked about the sense of self earlier. And part of a sense of self is that you can think, oh yeah, I'm Chris Dangerfield, that's who I am. And you've got this internal voice and this sense of awareness. And presumably there was a point where we didn't have that. And we gradually started gaining a sense of self-awareness, and it's been suggested that by taking certain drugs, this would have enhanced a sense of self-awareness, and then we could have passed those around, and gradually we became more self-aware. And presumably that was quite unpleasant, and that's what the myth in the Garden of Eden is talking about. Presumably it's like going from being a child where you're not self-aware to being an adult, and that can be quite frightening and unpleasant, and therefore you can become depressed and down. And it's been argued that one of the reasons why belief in God evolved is precisely because we became self-aware. This made us become hyper anxious, and therefore belief in God lessened that anxiety.
To counterbalance that, I mean, I don't know, French psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan talks about the mirror stage, when the child realizes that they are an other, that the other people in the room aren't all part of one thing, and that they're not just an I, but they're a you. That there's, I suppose it's awareness of pronouns essentially. And so you're saying on a cultural kind of evolutionary scale, that awareness was then counterbalanced by God simply because it was just too depressing to be aware.
Yeah, it's if you're standing there and you're realizing that everything is your responsibility and it's all down to you, that's presumably frightening and anxiety inducing. And therefore people that could develop something which would reduce that anxiety would be healthier, because their body wouldn't be under so much stress, and they'd be less likely to become overly anxious and depressed and whatever. And that may have been belief in God, and therefore you have a belief in eternal meaning, and therefore everything's okay. But similarly, if you believe that you have no freedom to do anything, then you might as well just sit down and die. So some belief in free will is surely adaptive, and as evidenced in those studies, it makes you feel your life has meaning. It makes you feel that you matter. It makes you feel high self-esteem. It makes you feel satisfied. It makes you feel less stress, or it's correlated with those things anyway. So I think it's this movement between depression at one end and anxiety at the other.
But someone like yourself who spends their life seeking truth, and somewhere on your journey you found this truth that you have no free will, and then it gets a bit complicated, because then you've chosen, well, I know that's true, but I'm going to entertain this illusion just because it's better, but it's not actually the truth. And I also liked it when you said there was some man standing there when we became aware. I pictured a bloke at a bus stop.
Well, the argument was that it was a woman. So women, oh God, I can't remember the guy's name. Cutler, Andrew Cutler, that's his name.
Right.
An interesting guy, and he argued that women are more pro-social than men, and so it's likely that the first human to ever speak was a woman, and it follows that the first person to ever have a sort of sense of self-awareness was probably a woman. And she may have sort of taught the man about self-awareness.
Well, they do tend to talk quite.
Yeah, exactly. and the argument was that certain kinds of snake venom can cause you to have these trips where you feel strongly self-aware, and that apple juice can act as an antidote to the venom. And this is his theory. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, I really like it. I'm looking at him now, actually, this Cutler fella, and he was one of the people in the videos I watched. But so this is really your area, isn't it? Something like this, when you said that it was a woman who first had realized that we were aware, wouldn't this be something that happened over thousands of years?
Yeah, for sure. It's simplifying it. So I suppose it's a bit like a comparison between levels of self-awareness. So sometimes, have you cut out, Chris?
No, I'm still here. I'm just not moving.
So sometimes when we are like super stressed and super instinctive, we lose self-awareness. We just act, and that's what a dog or a cat is basically like almost all the time. And then sometimes we are particularly self-aware. We have heightened self-awareness. Like, I don't know if you're on drugs or something. And so I think that's a comparison. So it would have started off slowly but surely, and then gradually we'd go into self-awareness and out of self-awareness, and then gradually we'd be in a situation where we are mainly self-aware. That's how I see it. Like
sorry, go on.
Well, I was going to say, like the movement from, I don't know, hunter-gathering to agriculture, it didn't happen overnight. We gradually went, first of all, like 10% of our food was from farming, then 20%, then 30%, then 40%, then eventually we're in a situation where it's like 90%.
Yeah, okay. And then there would have been a period, of course, where we became aware that we were aware. And that's probably when the arguments about does free will exist came about.
Yes, that's a good point. It may well be that at early levels of the cycle of civilization, you're so under stress and you're so just about surviving and you're so intensely religious, therefore, that there isn't really time to think about whether you're aware that you're aware. And then gradually you would get a sort of a social class that would be able to think about those things. And as the level of mortality salience and stress and whatever kind of goes down, we get cities, then you'd be a social class that would really, really be able to think about those things, and may even lose their belief in religion because mortality salience is associated with religiosity and whatever. And the mortality salience would be low, and therefore would really start thinking about those things. But they would also be in an evolutionary mismatch because they'd be living in the cities, and this would cause dysphoria and make them depressed as well. But yeah, I think that's a perfectly accurate way of seeing it. But I just think that it's quite an interesting point. I was thinking about this, though. It must be that free will is more fundamental than belief in God, because I would think that a lot of people don't believe in religion because religion is something that is an instinct. It's induced by living in a high mortality salience, for example, or high levels of stress or exclusion. And if those things are taken away, then we start to lose our belief in God. But even in circumstances where most people are atheistic these days, we still believe in free will. Like it's like love. It's such a deep thing. It's such a deep that even being put in a completely messed evolutionary mismatched environment, it still is induced, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, it goes without saying, doesn't it? That's what. It's just one of those things
There are some people, though, I imagine for genetic reasons, who even in our evolutionary mismatch with low mortality salience feel that God is there all the time. And so presumably if you go back a couple of 100 years, everybody would feel that God was there all the time. And that's how we are with free will, even now. But there are some people, not us, but there are some people that are perpetually depressed or something, that do not feel that. That do not feel they have free will. And we say these people have schizophrenia, or these people, we see these people as pathological. We say these people are deeply, profoundly depressed, or they have schizophrenia, and they don't feel they.
We can't go down that route because I don't believe in mental illness. Maybe that's
well, surely all mental illnesses is an extreme aberration from the norm of the society.
Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, fair enough. That's
so
fine.
If you have someone that, let's say they have a borderline personality disorder, this condition that's more female than male, and they go through phases of believing that they just don't have freedom at all, that their life is just controlled by external.
Oh, that's the thing that comes up, is it? Freedom comes up.
They don't feel they have any agency. They just feel that they're part of an unfolding tapestry, and they have no control.
What's the ridiculous DSM title for that?
Borderline. Well, it's not just them that have it, but borderline personality disorder.
Okay, BPD. Yeah. It's questioned, though, isn't it? It's questioned as a.
Yeah, well, a lot of them are schizophrenia, profound depression, and so you get people like that. Unless they're treated, those people do not feel there is free will. So
that's interesting.
At least with borderline, it oscillates. So some of the time they don't, sometimes they do. With full-blown schizophrenia, often they just feel that they don't have any free will.
I'm sorry to laugh at people suffering, but the idea of oscillating between having free will and not having free will, depending on the speed of the oscillation, could make your life quite entertaining.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing with borderline personality. So they have these extremes of mood, and all of us can go from here angry to here happy over a period of time, and they can go from here angry to here happy, right across the spectrum, boom, like that.
Wow.
So they're highly emotionally dysregulated, like a child.
Yeah, like a couple of my ex-girlfriends, when you put it like that, especially with that high moment of impact.
Bloody hell, yeah. If you went to art school,
7 years,
then there's going to be lots of, because women that have BPD and things like that are very good at things because they have these strong emotions and they want to express them, and so they tend to be into the arts.
Edward, my 7 years liberal art education was one long oscillating free will debate.
But the main thing is that 80% of girls that have this borderline personality self-harm, cut themselves or burn themselves or whatever. And when psychiatrists ask them about why, they say it's to feel a sense of control. Yeah. So they don't feel they have a sense of control over their lives. They feel that everything's controlled. They're don't have free will, and they have a sense of free will by cutting themselves, for example.
Yeah. I remember dating a beautiful girl, and when she took her clothes off, it looked like she'd been through a meat mincer a couple of times. It was a tragedy. Not that sexy either. I just want to say a couple of things. Thank you for the super chats. I will deal with those. If you've got questions for Edward, I will ask him. I'll prioritise the super chats because I like to grift, obviously. But I don't want to keep interrupting the conversation, so I'll do those towards the end. Edward, do you think, I mean, we've had like an explosion of AI over the last few years. I mean, it's been going on for longer than that, obviously, but in the public arena, so to speak. Do you think at some point, if you've got a belief in determinism, like an absolutist determinism, I don't know if that's the right phrase, but I think you know what I mean. Would technology be able to predict what you are going to do in 5 minutes, for instance?
Presumably it would depend on its knowledge of the variables involved.
No, sure, for sure, it would need a lot of data. But
if it had all the data, which would be vast, obviously, the sort of butterfly effect, though, would mean that you'd have to predict things down to the minutiae, wouldn't you? I mean, like if this wasp lands here rather than here, it could have and you will happen to be allergic to wasp venom or whatever. There's all kinds of things involved here. But in theory, if it could have all possible available data, then presumably yes, it could. And that's there's that what's it called? Not Vanilla Sky. That Tom Cruise film.
I think it is Vanilla Sky.
No, it's not. It's not Vanilla Sky. It's the other one. There's anyway, and this concept of pre-crime, and they can. Just tell.
Yeah. I know the one. Yeah, they've got those sort of women who've got they live in jelly or something.
That's right. I
think Philip K. Dick wrote it, didn't he?
Right.
Someone in the chat will give it to us in a minute. Minority Report. You can tell a YouTuber when they shout the chat and they want to get it. Minority Report. Okay, well let's widen it out from what you might say in the next 5 minutes to say something like who's going to win the Premier League next season, because they've got data going back hundreds of years. They've got all of the players and the statistics and data they've got on footballers. You know, there's heat maps of every game, where they were, how many goals they've scored, where they scored them for, how many accurate passes. There's a lot of data on footballers. And I'm just thinking that if I mean, I buy it. I buy the no free will. And when you said at the beginning, well, near the beginning of this chat, you said it's more the implications that are interested. And I agree with you that things that we take very much for granted, especially in England, like football, you're probably more of a rugby guy, aren't you?
No, not well. Yeah, I suppose I preferred rugby at school. I was better at it because I was tall for my age for most of my time. So I was you could get the kid that was good at football, just knock him into the mud.
You see, I was small for my age, and when we played rugby, I just sat on the floor. I didn't want those. I didn't go through puberty till I was 15. And I was in a scrum with men with beards, and it's quite frightening. It's not in the slightest bit sensual, but it's certainly frightening. So things like that, and when you start going along that, well, then that's all of sport. We might be able to predict to, it's going to be one of these two teams. I'm trying to think what other cultural events. I mean, maybe things like wars, the economy, obviously.
Elections could be. I mean, the psephologists have got it down to a reasonably fine art already, but it could be down to an even finer art.
Sorry, what was that? Psephologist?
Yeah, people that research politics from a statistical viewpoint.
They're called psephologists, are they? What's the etymology of that?
I don't know. That and even the winning of prizes for literature and Nobel prizes for science, I suppose there could be elements of that they could predict. But yeah, in theory, it could make all. I mean, even now, it can make predictions just based on the face of whether a person is heterosexual or homosexual, with sort of 80% accuracy or something. So
can you make that distinction with 80% accuracy?
I don't think I could. No, I think they'd have to be quite extreme for me to make the distinction. And similarly with political viewpoint, we know that there's evidence that of facial differences, and they would be able to predict that. I mean, you go back to
hang on. Are we returning to some kind of phrenology here?
Well, no, phrenology. If you've read my book, How to Judge People by What They Look Like, phrenology was very specifically the idea that the brain would vary in shape and kind of almost like subtle bumps on it based on character. This isn't phrenology. This is physiognomy or physiognomy. Oh, okay. And physiognomy, yeah. I wrote a whole book on this, sort of short book. There's sound evidence for this, and AI is now becoming the ultimate physiognomist. It's able to tell with quite good accuracy whether a person is conservative or liberal from their face.
Wow. I had a company trying to sell me some kind of AI bot for I run an e-commerce business, and they said we put all of your previous customer service data into the machine, sort of thing, and it does its work, blah blah blah, and then it answers questions that people write in and say, oh, I've got blah 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 blah, and I sort of said, yeah, but you know, there's some quite specific things that I don't know if that data, and he just stopped me and he said, test it, because you'll be surprised how predictable people in certain situations are. And he said, and in customer service, he said, we wouldn't give you a free trial if we didn't think it would work. And, you know, I know what kind of questions we get asked daily, hundreds of, and it was frighteningly good. You know, I went to my staff, I said, which one's the machine and which one did I answer? And no one was.
It's passing the. I mean, I was slightly concerned though today. I asked ChatGPT who coined the phrase "spiteful mutant," and a lot of people say that I coined it, but I didn't. It was actually somebody called William Hamilton, and it asserted that Vladimir Putin coined the phrase "spiteful mutant" in a speech in 2017, and that's rubbish. Although apparently he did use some kind of Russian translation of the phrase, but he didn't coin it. So I explained to ChatGPT that it was wrong, that William Hamilton coined it in 1964, and then he's admitted that and whatever. But I don't know if it...
It usually apologises, doesn't it?
Yeah, apologise. Yeah, it's a very polite robot. But that's utterly wrong, good God.
It does lie, ChatGPT, it does lie without a doubt, but it's revolutionised my work. It arrived and it is now used in pretty much every aspect of my business.
Oh, I was doing an academic paper the other day on intelligence, and I had to work out like statistical significance and things like that of these two samples. And it used to have to be that I'd have to put the data in and blah 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 and calculate it. But now I just gave ChatGPT the data and that's it, done, wham, boom.
Yeah.
And correct. And so yeah, it's going to revolutionise. It's going to make it so much quicker to write books. And like my former boss, Richard Lynn. It was quite interesting that he got his job as a university lecturer in the early 50s, and he publishes a couple of papers a year, that sort of thing, until personal computers come along, and then boom, off he goes. So he's so much more productive, as you could, because imagine in the old days you had to write it out by longhand, get a secretary to type it up. Inevitably there'd be mistakes. You send it back, you type it up again, probably more mistakes, type it up again, send it off to peer review. Get your reviews, retype out the whole bloody thing, or rewrite out the whole. I mean, imagine how long it took.
Yeah.
And so ChatGPT is going to have, if it has any positive consequences, it's going to be things like that you can just get the crap done, and get onto the even like book covers now. I mean, I know I've got a book coming out at the end of the year probably called Woke Eugenics.
Can I just stop you then? Can I just stop you? Scrubs, no, Edward said probably. That's a mistake I've been making. Carry on, Edward.
What?
It's all right. You said you've got a book probably coming out by the end of the year. I've had a novel coming out by the end of the year for 7 years, and I noticed you said probably there, and I'm going to use that.
I finished the manuscript. It's just up to the publisher as to when they publish it. But so that's the variable. But I bet they will use AI to make the cover. And in the old days, they'd have to have paid an artist to do that.
No, I think they'll still use a designer, though. You can't, you still need a designer to make your cover. He might use Midjourney or something to actually make the images, but you can't just get the bloke who works at the publishers to design a cover because Midjourney can. The people designing my cover, they look at Amazon bestsellers and they work out what typeface is selling well, what colors are selling well, and they start forming my cover based on those sorts of things. But put enough data into it, you could probably just get it to press a button and it make your cover. Oh, weirdly, you must do this. Do you use StreamYard?
I do, yes.
Have you not yet? When you put in upload thumbnail, it now offers to make your thumbnail using AI.
Yes, but I like to make my thumbnail myself, just to have a feeling of control and free will and meaning.
But you take the illusion. Well, I tried it yesterday, and I have to say it was fucking awful. It really wasn't good. But I tell you, we're sort of moving into AI here. Well, we will come back out because I've talked a lot about AI on this channel. But people get paid millions for writing the subject line of an email. If you're writing the subject line advertising the new Apple iPhone, if you can get 5% more people to open that, Apple could earn an additional 500 million. So you get these people who are getting paid millions of dollars for writing 6 letters. And with AI, that I think those jobs are going, because they will be able to predict how to get more people to open it based on previous results and data that they bought off of Facebook, X.
What did you say the name of the art program was that does art covers for you? Midjourney.
I'll send you a link.
Oh, okay. And what's your novel about, Chris?
It's about a bloke who had a massive heroin habit, and he decided, instead of going to what would have been about his 20th rehab, he thought he'd go to Patong in Thailand and get clean amongst the ladies of the night instead. True story.
I shall look forward to reading that.
Oh, no, I'll get you a copy for sure. I was going to say, actually, while you were talking about how technology has affected publishing, my editor is editing. I use Scrivener because it's 700 pages and Word just doesn't. Just chapters disappear. But I upload the latest edit onto Dropbox. My editor can then edit that while I'm working on it. I mean, like you say, before, print out 600, 700 pages, send them from Cambodia to England, wait for him to do his work, send it back. That's me not doing any writing for 8, 9, 10 weeks. Whereas now, here it is, bing, and I can continue with it. Let's try and get back a little bit to the free will. Excuse me, I feel like I'm stuck a little bit on this belief, accepting the illusion. Are there any other areas in life where we take something that we know isn't strictly true because the reality is not necessarily unbearable, but it's better to believe the bullshit?
Erasmus talks about love as a kind of madness, and so if you think about this idea of what's the evolutionary purpose of love, at its best, it's to strongly bond together two people so that both think the other one is perfect, basically, or both kind of feel that, such that they can stay together long enough to have children and raise the children.
Yeah.
But then for the purpose of societal stability and so forth, we like them to stay together for the rest of their lives. Now, I suspect that on some level, when you're in love with somebody, on some deep level, if you really think about it, you know about their flaws. You know about the ways in which they're quite different from you. You know about the fact that there are certain things you don't agree on. You know, I mean, even with, let's distinguish between as well, I don't know, wife material and mistress material. Is there a difference? Well, surely there is. Surely the kind of person you want to be your wife is going to be stable and reliable and loyal, and therefore on a level a bit boring. But the kind of the kind of person that's going to be your mistress, perhaps she's like your ontological double, and you see your own beauty in her face, and you see yourself in her eyes, and she's just like you, and she's exciting and whatever. But ultimately, you know that she's a complete mental.
Yeah.
And so to get through these moments, presumably you have to lie to yourself, although deep down at the back of your mind you kind of know. And that's where I think, with what I was saying earlier about social conformism, that's how I think people kind of get triggered. So you want to say to yourself, I'm a good person, I'm a strong person, I'm a moral person. You want to have a positive worldview of yourself, but you're frozen. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm just not
you
moving.
You want to get on in life, and you want to get social status and money and whatever. And so the way you do that is by kind of forcing yourself by effortful control to adopt the dominant worldview. But on some level, you know that view is false and that view is a lie, and so on. And so therefore, when someone confronts you with that, and confronts you with the fact that worldview is a lie and that you are disingenuous, then you can explode at them and make it like a sort of narcissistic rage almost, and try and shut them out and make them go away, so you can regain cognitive consonance, because you know on some level deep down that you're lying to yourself.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a little bit like that. I think it's something we all do in life to varying degrees. It's something that someone like a narcissist particularly is going to...
Well, that was what I was going to ask you. So in that respect, a little bit of narcissism is it's almost like a bit of medicine, isn't it? It allows you to trick yourself, to con yourself a little bit, because you've got to put something to the back of your mind, or whatever, so that you can, I don't want there to be no meaning. It's not. I'm glad I was this old when I found it. Well, it was a few years ago, but can you imagine you get to primary school, and today's lesson, kids, is nihilism and the meaningless of life.
Well, I think in terms of feeling it, I think that there's evidence that personality changes across the lifespan, such that neuroticism, i.e. feeling negative feelings strongly, goes down. That's why I said earlier, these people that have borderline personality, they're kind of like children. They feel negative feelings very strongly. Neuroticism goes down. Extroversion, i.e. feeling positive feelings very, very strongly, to some degree goes down. Conscientiousness, i.e. impulse control, goes up. And agreeableness, i.e. altruism, goes up. So these people that have BPD are childlike in that they have low agreeableness, they have low impulse control, they have high neuroticism, and they have high they feel these extremes. So that would, but there's this dip in your sort of late adolescence, where you become higher in neuroticism, lower in conscientiousness, lower in agreeableness. And this is why people that are in that kind of university age, they have very high levels of depression and anxiety and criminality and things like that, because there's this dip. And the argument is that the purpose and evolution of that regression, for that period, is to help you to break the bond with your family, to help you to go out and make your way in the world, which requires a bit of narcissism, perhaps. Because narcissism is associated with low agreeableness and to some extent high neuroticism, and to possibly even to be a soldier and kill for the good of the group. So actually, I think people go through a phase of being nihilistic when they're about 20 or something, and then they grow out of it.
So there's apart from very bad poetry, there's an evolutionary reason for teenage angst. It's part of the separating from the parents and getting out into the world, because that's what you described, really, wasn't it? That sort of
that's one theory for it. Yeah, I mean, there could be others. I mean, it could be that women in prehistory at about that age that's when the men would be interested in them, and therefore you have to be very, very selective and very, very careful about which man you take, and therefore that militates in favor of high social anxiety and things like that. But yeah, basically there would be a reason for it. But what I'm saying is that it's consistent with the idea that when you were saying, oh well, it's I haven't imagined how awful it would be to experience that when you were young rather than now. I think they do experience it when they're young and they grow out of it. And I think a lot of people that are extreme leftists, for example, haven't grown out of it. They're just perpetual teenagers, and life is just so unfair.
Agreed, intellectually and emotionally immature. What you've just explained there takes us back to being in love as well, because you fall in love with someone at 23, you're still in love with them at 43, but neither of you are the same person, because you've both changed dramatically in 20 years. I'd hope so anyway, because otherwise you're not learning or growing. So I'm just wondering whether I mean, you've got that, what do they call it, the honeymoon period of a relationship where each partner's the perfect partner. You know, it's sort of unconsciously you're exactly what they want. And then there's the next bit, which is and you start realizing you've got to compensate, and there's a few sort of, you can't have it all. But in 10 years' time, you're not the same person that met that person, and you're going to say to yourself, yeah, I get it. It's not like it was then, but there's other benefits to be had from staying in this situation.
Yes, exactly. So one of the big predictors of messing up a child's life is that the parents get divorced. Now, part of that could be that there are certain traits that predict getting divorced, such as neuroticism and low conscientiousness and things like this, and that these are passed on genetically to the child. But then there is the argument that that it is traumatic for parents to get divorced, and if a child is traumatized at a highly developmental plastic age, like 12 or something, then that may set off a difficult trajectory. So that's one reason for couples that are where the love is on the wane to stay together for as long as they can.
The problem with that is I remember, and I've seen since, couples who've stayed together for the kid, but the kid's not an idiot. They know what's going on, and that potentially can do more damage. That's going in a different direction, really.
Well, maybe, yeah. But also there's companionship, and there's all kinds of sort of other sound social reasons for it to work at it. But I'm not sure. I'm just saying that's the.
No, I am. I said for sure. It's the way working class people say. I understand what you're saying, Professor.
Okay. Well, it was for sure. It's right. So anyway, so I think this is a part of the dynamic of it, and so it's but again, it does involve a lot of you're telling yourself things that in any given circumstance, coming up with a way of rationalizing and justifying what you're doing so you can feel good about your situation in life. So, for example, I know a woman who went through a crap marriage and got divorced. And she said, the way she said to herself was, well, I'm glad it happened in a way because I've learned a lot about myself. And I thought to myself, I said to her, come on. I mean, surely it would have been better if it hadn't happened. And we were all telling you, okay, she got a bit of money out of it. He was quite rich. But we were all telling you that this was not the right person for you. And she was like, well, what else am I supposed to do, Ed? I have to come up with a way. It's the psychologically healthy thing to do is to come up with a way of telling myself that this has some positive consequences to it.
So people are saying I'm a great ventriloquist. I assume I'm about that, people. From all this, we've done an hour. Is that we tell ourselves a lot of lies to get through life. I mean, there's a bunch of French philosophers that I guarantee you've got no time for at all. I'm talking about your Jacques Derrida, Julia Kristeva, Jacques Lacan, and that one of their arguments is culture exists to distract us from the awareness that we're mortals. It's the only reason it's there. It's just a big distraction, because when you realize you're going to die, well, it's not very nice, is it? So we distract ourselves with cinema and I don't really know what else people do, because I just sit
drink, eat, and be merry, for tomorrow we shall die.
There you go. You've summed it up in one line. Excuse me. So where do you go with this? Where does it go? Where does this argument go? I mean, all the people I saw defending free will were religious, I have to say that. And so it was interesting when you started talking about that link up, like all of them, when I was doing my sort of swatting last night. It's a bit of a silly question in some respects, but if we as a culture let go of the idea of free will, like we generally, or yeah, that's the word, let go of the idea of God, which I think, like as you said, at one time people just believed in God. God exists, and I've been, I've known that since I've known I can know. Would there be some kind of, I mean, are we on the start of some kind of cleaving where the whole of society is going to realize that we do not have free will? I think I'm asking, is there a potential impact on society were this to become a dominant kind of narrative?
Well, I think it has. I mean, I think it's. I think you could argue that we're seeing the playing out of this already. So if you go back 30 or 40 years, you're taught that it's your responsibility. It's up to you. Get on with it. And increasingly, there is a grievance hierarchy where everybody is able to say, or increasing numbers of people are able to say, I should get special pleading because I kind of almost have a lower level of free will or control of my actions or responsibility for my actions because I'm on the grievance hierarchy. And this in some way impacts me and means that I have less freedom less autonomy. And therefore,
are you talking about things like people who say a couple of 100 years ago their family were enslaved and
and they're saying that it makes me depressed now or down now, and this gives me less autonomy, and this explains why I act out and act in an aggressive way or whatever, and I should be given a carte blanche to commit crime. So this kind of thing.
Edward, we have stumbled upon the most amazing denouement. This is miraculous. So you're saying, or you're suggesting, or entertaining the idea that we are at that point where
we have been at that point for a while. Like this rise in narcissism. This is clear. Like if you go back to 1950, it was something like 5% of people would say in surveys, "I am a very important person." By 1990, this was 80%. Presumably, it's more now. And so you have this rise in narcissism, and there's a degree to which when you're a narcissist, nothing is your fault. Nothing is your fault. It's always other people's. You're perfect. So it's always other people's fault. So it's therefore you're almost denying your own free will. You're denying your own ability to mess up. You can't mess up. You just do. You're not free to mess up. You just do perfect things. So you're almost
sorry to interrupt, but it's relevant. Someone described free will as a kind of currency, and I think that's sort of what you're talking about now, in a way, or the denial, or the as a kind of currency. So when you say 40 years ago, are you talking about a certain book or a writer or a movement?
No, I'm just thinking that if we go back to the generation of people born in the 20s, then by the time they were interviewed for this survey in the 50s, they have a very low sense of oh, I'm not important. And then across the 60s, 70s, 80s, this changed to the average person saying I'm very important. And so it's almost
why?
Well, because you had a society that raised people to be functioning elements of a group and to suppress individualism, i.e. equality, harm avoidance, whatever, that has flipped over to a society that is concerned with equality and harm avoidance, and therefore with not hurting children's feelings and making everyone feel equal and welcomed and important, over and above everything else, basically spoiling people and making them entitled.
Hang on, so are you saying I'm actually asking this, so I don't quite understand it. Are people in a collective more likely to say they're not important because they're just part of a collective? And is it individuals, people who see themselves as just an individual?
Yeah, people that are high in group-oriented values, i.e. conservatives, are less narcissistic. People that are high in individually oriented values, where you virtue signal about equality and harm avoidance, and i.e. Liberals, are more narcissistic. They have a stronger belief that they're perfect, they're wonderful, they're entitled to special treatment, they're special. Increasingly, it seems, as a culture, there is this outbreak of narcissism. All kinds of things have caused it. One is, I think, mollycoddling of kids and spoiling kids over the last 50 years or so. Probably the rise of mobile phones and cameras all the time and selfies probably feeds into it. That you're constantly taking photographs of yourself and admiring yourself and things like this, rather than suppressing those desires. And a society that says it's right for you to go on about how offended you are and go on about your feelings and whatever. So people that would formerly have suppressed narcissistic instincts are now rewarded, if anything, within certain boundaries for going on about them. So you have an increasingly sort of narcissistic society, and one of the things that you get with narcissism is a belief, almost that you're not. I don't know about free will exactly. It's not about the word, but that you're not responsible. It's not yours. You're perfect. It's always somebody else's fault. Yeah. And in that sense, if it's always like a narcissist, so it's not my fault I did this, it's society's fault.
Yeah, there's something wrong with the system.
Yeah, exactly. You never admit, and in that sense, you don't have free will. When you do something good, then that's brilliant because you're fantastic and you're amazing. But if you do something bad, oh well, that's somebody else's fault. And it's a bit like the Christian we mentioned earlier. Does something good, that's her fault with God's guidance. Does something bad, well, that's God's plan, but it's a more malevolent thing. It's one is being thankful to God and saying, oh, well, God is guiding me and whatever. And the other is a malevolent blaming the system, blaming other people.
Incredible. Edward, I've got a couple of super chats. They're usually nonsense, but someone might ask you a question. The first one says, hello. That's nice, from Scory. Hello, Scory. Andy, thanks you for that, Andy. Mrs. Me in it says, nice cravat. Where did you get it? Lol. Free nutter soul me. There you go. Absolutely nothing from Edward. Just nothing. No, it's no one knows what she's talking about. That's a thing on here. Thank you, Mrs. Meany. Arklow Rock says, I've been following this subject on YouTube. I think we have very constrained will, certainly in no way completely free, but I think action as an act of sheer will is a fundamental property of a self-reflecting consciousness. I don't know what that means, Edward.
Yeah, that just sounds like a sort of word salad to me. It sort of sounds very profound, but if I think about it, action is as an act of sheer will. What's the difference between an act of will and an act of sheer will? So action is an act of will. Will is a fundamental property of a self-reflecting consciousnness. So you're saying that having free will is a property of being self-aware. But what if self-awareness is an illusion? What if that's just a dogma? That's just an assertion.
Yeah, I'm a bit confused with that one. He's a lovely bloke, though, and thank you, Arklow. Arklow, check out some of the Robert Sapolsky stuff. If you type in determined and Robert free will, you'll find it. Thank you. Mrs. Me and it's back. Right, I'm going to cook a bit of dinner now for my husband. My free will to do this because I love him. Riddle me this. You've missed this a little bit, I think, Mrs. Me in it, but I do love you, so no worries.
Well, she sent it ages ago, so she sent it at 7:34, and it's now 8:20. So
I'll take responsibility for that. Brad says, if free will is not real, how come I can remember watching it? Checkmate. You've done us both. Brad.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, and Cravat Club. There you go. Thank you very much, Brad. I'm just going to have a look at entropy. Anything you want to... I will put your channel link in the description. I'm sure everyone here knows Edward's channel anyway, but I did omit to put it in the description of this video, but I will do.
Well, if they don't, then a good introduction to my research is this book, The Naked Classroom, The Evolutionary Psychology of Your Time at School. And go over to my Substack, jollyheretic.com, where I put the stuff I did.
Edward, I will put all of those. I'll put your Substack link in the description. I'll put a link to that book. And listen, people, if you search Professor Edward Dutton, you'll find out very quickly he's on the right side. It's some of the stuff people say about him is just outrageous. Like, he's a professor who's put time and effort into explaining things, and it's just like right-wing ethno-Nazi bastard shit cunt. Okay,
yeah, you can never trust the Daily Telegraph. No.
There you go. Well, the Sunday Times said I was grooming teenage Nazis.
Oh.
Yeah, nice. I did get an entropy from my man Plot Loser. Thank you for a very good discussion. Question for both gentlemen. I think I'll ask Edward if he'll come on another time and do this area. But in your opinion, is autism real? I don't believe in mental illness, so it's a no from me. But it's a tricky question because
is autism real? The idea is that we are all on a spectrum, and that what characterizes autism is that you are particularly high in feeling sensations, that you are particularly interested in systematizing an objects, that you are, because of these things, are very high in anxiety because you feel feelings very strongly, including the sensations of your own body. This makes you very black and white in your thinking. Sometimes it makes you hate change, and you are low in empathy. You are low in the ability to read the minds of others, and indeed you're not that interested in external signals of internal states. That's the essence of it. And therefore you can become obsessive because of the fact that you desire structure and order to the world, and therefore you can become highly obsessive. And we're all on various spectrums with regard to those different subtraits. And sometimes they can be so severe that they cause a person to have difficulty functioning in everyday life. And in that sense, therefore, it's a pathology. And so I believe in it in so much as that's the case.
Maybe we'll get... do you know Jeffrey Sharla?
No.
Thomas Saz?
No.
Okay, maybe I'll talk to you about this.
I interviewed on my channel a guy called Simon Baron Cohen, and he
yes, Sasha's brother or cousin, I think.
Cousin, and he researches autism. So you should get him on.
Jeff Sharla and Thomas Saz. Thomas Saz is dead now. Their life's work has been the myth of mental illness. Sharla's been on my channel twice, but that would be an interesting conversation with your two very different backgrounds. Okay. I mean, they see psychiatry, especially the DSM sort of rooted psychiatry, as just a damage to society. And
I know psychiatrists. I know working psychiatrists that are skeptical of a lot of psychiatry.
Yeah. Have you seen the Jonathan Davis? Is it? He does it. There's a great YouTube. He talks about the arrival of the DSM, how the first one was made, and the man Alan, I think it's something like Sphincter, Alan Spitzer or something, outright says it was bullshit. He said we voted to put certain mental illnesses.
Well, that's what they do. So homosexuality was a classified mental illness until a few decades ago. Transsexuality was a classified mental illness until about a decade ago. And they've just declared in Peru that transsexuality is a mental illness according to their equivalent of the DSM the other day. So there's a strong political force. I mean, your argument should be something should be classified as a mental illness if it interferes with the ability to procreate, because that's the essence of an organism, to procreate. That's the original. That was how medicine was in the 19th century. If it interferes, there you
go. I think, well, I don't know though, because mental suggests pathological mental illness, and it's just behavioural to me. But that's well, I'll talk to you another time. Maybe we'll sort something out there. Right. Thank you, Plot Loser, and I will just quickly. Edward, put your Substack, a link to your book and your YouTube channel in Twitter, and then I'll get them on this as soon as you've put them in our message.
Right, yeah.
And then I'll just copy and paste them into because this will only have had a few hundred views while we've been running, but it will get a couple of thousand in the next week. So you might get a couple of ne'er-do-wells come over and ruin your streams. Who knows? Can people on YouTube, I put a poll on there and we had 169 votes and we've had an hour and 22 minutes of discussion. So, I don't think you can change it. Well, originally 50%, 169 people voted, 50% believe in free will, 24% no, and 26% don't know. It's a powerful thing in society, free will. Anything coming up in your life exciting, Edward? You've got the publishing of this book.
I've got a Jolly Heretic meet and greet in London at the end of the month, and there'll be me, Sargon of Akkad, an Autism expert called Richard Grannon, the guy called Academic Agent, and a comedian as well called Nick Dixon, and I'll be having the premiere of my new film about New Labour's destruction of Britain, which is called the Year Zero. So there's that, and I've been making films and things. I've just had a film out on the Muslim conquest of Spain and the Reconquista, and I shall be speaking at a conference on narcissism in Liverpool at the end of the month as well. So those are some interesting things that are coming up.
There you go, people. That London meetup sounds great. So I'll get the links off of Edward. I'll get them in the description of this. I'll also put them in the Scrubs lifeboat. Worth checking them out. Edward, thank you so much for coming on and having a chat with us. It's been great.
Absolute pleasure to talk to you again. Been far too long.
I'll ping you an email. I'll ping you a Twitter direct message in a couple of months or so, and we'll maybe do something about mental illness.
Excellent. See you then.
Yeah, look after yourself. Cheers, Edward. Ta-da.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Edward Dutton, old Teddy D. Amazing. What an active man. Books, movies, events. He doesn't know his camera's still on. He doesn't, but he's just realised because he's heard me say it. There you go, son. He's going to do a striptease, people. Thank you for the super chats, people. I'm going to put on, I know what I'm going to put on now to play us out. If I can find it. He's turned it off now. Let me chuck him out of the stream so that he doesn't accidentally do a nudie. But people, look into that free will stuff. Search on, go to YouTube, just type in Robert Determined Free Will, and there'll be 100 odd podcasts where you'll see Robert Sapolsky, and it's properly his stuff, giving you some very convincing and very, as I was trying to make out in the conversation with Edward, you know, if you buy that there's no free will, you lose quite a lot. And, you know, even someone like Edward said, well, I don't want to put words into his mouth. You can watch it again. but he chooses to sort of believe an illusion, as have I, because I don't want to live in a meaningless, kind of, I'm not an individual. I suppose I still am, but the definition of individual's kind of gone down the pan a little bit. I'm just gonna open up my buy me a beer, because sometimes someone actually does. That's that QR code. And no, they haven't. Right, here we go. I will put your messages on the screen while I'm playing the tunes. I'll play 2 tunes tonight because it's relatively early here still. Let me see where it is. Hang on, give me a couple of seconds. Thanks, obviously, to Edward for coming on. Thanks to everyone who donated. Thanks to everyone who came to watch. Without an audience, there's no stream. That is ridiculous. I'm just filling time here looking for this video. Hang on. Where is it? Ah, there it is. Gotcha. Let's pause that. Don't want to ruin the surprise. I think most of you probably know what's coming now. Mrs. Meehan's come back in. Hey, you. I may be cryptic, but I type all the right letters, but not necessarily in the right order. I sent you that cravat. You didn't send me this cravat. This is from New and Lingwood. You didn't send me a cravat. You sent me a scarf, and it's a 2-tool scarf. It's an original 2-tool scarf, and I love it. But you did not send me this new. Do you want to see what a cravat looks like? And you'll compare it with what you sent me. A cravat has got a flat bit in the middle that's pleated, and it opens out to 2 of them. There's 1 of them at each end. And you kind of wear it like a tie, but I wear it as an ascot. I think it's called an ascot. It might be a Hendon. Well, it's like tying a half Windsor, but instead of tucking this last one through, like if I was tying a half Windsor now, I'd poke that through a little hole that's where my index finger is, but you don't. What you do, you open it out, and then you just tuck it in there. And because I've done it properly this time, I can actually open the second button, and it fills the space. That's how I would have usually gone, but I was so rushed. So you did send me an absolutely wonderful scarf, but not a cravat. So I wondered what you said in that other thing when you said, where did you get it? Oh, New and Lingwood. It's at the bottom of the Burlington Arcade. It's just by the, what's his name? The old dandy. There's a statue of him there. I can't think of his name. Bo. Come on, someone knows who I'm talking about. The old dandy, Bo. Don't worry about it. Here's some music for you. You're going to enjoy it. It always goes down a treat. Feel free to top the grift up. Entire screen, audio on, Bosch. Let me just make sure that's full screen. Have we got that on? Yes, we have. It's your friend of mine. It's Alex. I'll see you when the music's over. Turn out the lights. Now it should start playing.
System, the government store, the paradigm of absolute control. And that's why we're just out here doing simple things, pointing out that we're meant to be in nature and be natural. And this is where we find the source that God made to transcend the New World Order.
Beau Brummel, thank you.
And that's why they want to try to keep us out of it.
I'm angry. I've had enough of these people. They're a bunch of Christian murderers, scum. They're on giant death factories, keeping babies alive, selling their body parts. What more do you need to know about these people? I go out and face these scum. They literally crawl out from under rocks. They have green looking skin, and they run around screaming, we love Satan, we want to eat babies. I have them on video. man. She sleeps in the same room with that creepy widow woman whose mother wears a hood over her head. That woman number one is ugly. Imagine how bad she smells, man. I told her and Obama just stink. Obama and Hillary both smell like sulfur. In a room, vampire pot and the goblins are hobbling round, coming after us. My spirit gets close to that evil and I feel it go. We're such self-centered crap, we don't even notice hell itself rising up against us. Millions upon people of the very worst type, and I'm so pissed. We're gonna stare your daughter at the mall. We're gonna stab your wife, your son. We're gonna stab you with a butcher knife, and then the police chief is gonna say, we love our Somalis, we love our Muslims. Oh, they're so good, oh, they're so sweet.
I was watching Fox News as I worked out this morning.
So was I. That's ridiculous, isn't it? Two things. If you don't know people, I'm a writer. Top link in the description. You can get to my Substack. It's all free. It's not philosophy, though. It's literary fiction and quite unpleasant. So, yeah. Mrs. Me, innit? What do you mean ungrateful? You sent me a lovely Tootle scarf. I said thank you. But you did not send me a New and Lingwood cravat. If you want, it's kind of fits in with what me and Edward were talking about. I'll buy into the untruth of it if you want. Thanks for the New and Lingwood cravat, but you didn't buy it. But there you go. I am very grateful. I always say lovely things about you. But there you go anyway. Hello, Pax Max. Long time. Thanks for that one, Packer. Muchano Kaprasha Katutu. For people who are members of Lockpicking Legend, I'm doing a live lounge on Thursday, 5 o'clock next week. You don't need to be a member. I'm going to scrub. You can still be a member of that channel, but I'm going to tell people it wasn't working. So I'm going to show them what they're missing and then say, like this channel, you can donate if you want to. But don't worry, I'll be pinging links and bits and bobs around nearer the time. But thanks for coming. Look after yourselves. And I'll see you for a stream. What day are we? Thursday. Probably tomorrow. If not tomorrow, it'll be Saturday. Ah, lovely. Look after yourselves. Hoita!